All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the pod. I'm Jacob, and today I've got Joey from Christ United. So Joey, could you tell me a little bit about how you got into your faith and kind of what got you started into it?
Yeah. What got me into my faith was, I guess, early on was my parents raising me in it. So I was
Mm.
raised evangelical, mostly Baptist, and was just raised to love Scripture and love God. Was baptized at 10 in a non-denominational church, and just was following the Lord as faithfully as I could as a kid. As I got into my teenage years, I was starting to have doubts with God through a lot of different reasons. One of the big reasons was I was going to a Baptist youth group, but I started going to a Pentecostal youth group as well, and was
Mm.
getting really different messaging on certain topics from both of those pastors, especially around like the voice of God. And the youth pastor and all the kids in this Pentecostal youth group could really confidently say they hear the voice of God, and God tells them to say this to this person and to heal this person. And the Pentecostal experience was overall really eye opening to like the idea of spiritual gifts and miracles happening even today. Excuse me. But it was hard because I didn't get to experience any of that. I remember specifically one time going up to pray for a friend who was like crying during a worship experience. And I was like, all right, God, give me the words to say. And like nothing came to mind. And I wanted to have that experience so badly. And so I don't know, all that to say, my flesh and my sin took that as an opportunity to just say, all right, God, you do you, I'm going to do me, and just started going the way of a lot of other people that I was friends with in high school that weren't following the Lord and were doing
Mm.
things that were against His commands. And I followed suit until I went to work at a summer camp. I worked at a Christian summer camp when I was 18. I just graduated high school. So at an all-time low. Life wasn't going well for me. That path I was trying to do wasn't working. And I think that maybe it was God's grace. And it was in a worship night leading up to our first week of having campers come to this camp that I just had this overwhelming sensation, almost like some invisible person, some invisible force was like giving me a big hug. And in that moment, I very clearly heard the voice of God. It's also been the clearest it's ever been, probably since. And yeah, God just like spoke to me, reminded me that I belong to Him, that He loves me, and that I'm more than welcome to try to come back and follow Him again. And so ever since then, I mean, there's been a lot of life that's happened since, but ever since then, that's been the trajectory of my faith journey. That was a huge launch point for me to really take my faith and own it and live it out.
Yeah, I think I saw your videos, and you were talking about how you went from like evangelical, Baptist, Pentecostal, and charismatic to like more like reformed into where you are now is, which I assume is what you're at now. Is like I went from the same thing. My dad was a Pentecostal pastor.
Oh
And
wow,
he
yeah.
yeah, he's, like, probably the calmest Pentecostal pastor I've ever met. I've never heard him, like, speak in tongues or any of that, and it's just I'd always felt, like, out of place in it. I even went to become was gonna become a minister, and I was in a room with all these people, and I was like, "I am not as spiritual as these people." I mean, they were, like, speaking in tongues and doing all this. I was like, "I am out of my
Mhm.
league," and then I just kinda, like, got out of it, like, I wasn't locked in for, like, maybe, like, 5 or 6 months, and then I started going to this campus ministry. I went to ECU for a year and then dropped
Yeah.
out to do construction, and I just started getting more into it and learning more about my faith, and then it was like watching YouTube and, like, other people started helping me realize, "Hey, maybe I should do more. Maybe I'm, like, a better fit into this and that stuff," and that's what, like, I felt like really just locked me in, and now I go to, like, a
Mhm.
Reformed Baptist church, and I love it and that stuff.
Nice.
It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
I
YouTube's done a
first
lot of work.
yeah, I first stepped into it, I was like, "This is weird, why is nobody shouting right now?" It's like it was like
Yeah,
worship, I was like, "Why is
right.
nobody moving around?" But yeah.
Everybody's
So,
worshiping with their hands by their sides. Nobody's
yeah, I was like
nobody's
the
hitting
only
any of this.
person I put my hands up, I was like, "Why is nobody else doing this right now?"
Like, what's going on?
Yeah, and then so you said you were a youth pastor, was that after, you came back into the faith after the summer camp? So how did that go for you?
Yeah, that was I went to after that summer camp I became a leader in a group called Young Life. It's a parachurch organization. Its goal
Mhm,
is reaching kids that aren't in the church, bringing Christ to them, and then bringing them into the church. It's a non-denominational ministry, so there's not a specific church we're trying to
mhm,
get kids to go to. We're just trying to get them to Christ. And through that, decided I wanted to do ministry. And so went to school for it, 4 years. And then right after that, it was actually my last year of school. I became a youth pastor at a non-denominational church. I don't know if
Mhm.
you've heard of Acts 29. They're a church planting network that came out of a pretty big church in the Seattle area.
Mhm.
Guy named Mark Driscoll, Mars Hill.
Yeah.
It kind of was birthed out of this church that eventually became very problematic. And yeah, I think that seeped into the network a little bit more. But I became a
Yeah.
youth pastor at one of those churches and was a youth pastor there for 2 years. Yeah, that was a big part of as I was a youth pastor. That was a big part of me. I've always really loved theology, and ecumenical theology, especially, has always been a constant in my faith walk. Funny enough, as I look back, but the youth pastor thing was when I really started going like, for myself personally, do I want to still be non-denominational, evangelical, or is there something else that maybe is more fitting for me theologically and just practically? Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah, yeah, that does make sense. So what church did you move to? Did you move to just like a different denomination, or was it like what denomination are you now and how did you get there? Did you go through like
Yeah,
old school churches, get into it, or just like go right into the deep end?
it's been a bit of a process. So like initially I was very pulled towards Catholicism as I started learning more about it.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, was basically trying to, I mean, I was going to adoration chapels where you sit in front of
Mhm.
the communion host. I was praying the rosary. I was um, trying to meet with like Catholic friends and priests. And I have a friend who's a Catholic professor at a college. So meeting with him, just trying to like take in as much as I could.
Mhm.
I'm not Catholic at the moment. I've moved and I've gotten a new job, and in that process, I've done a lot of more studying. And
Mhm.
I'm currently in process of becoming Anglican. I don't call myself an Anglican. I still
Mhm.
call myself an evangelical for clarity's sake. But once I'm confirmed at a confirmation ceremony, then I'll consider myself Anglican.
Yeah. So like with evangelicals and Protestants, I watch a lot of Redeem Zoomer and he's very hard on like separating those two
Yeah.
groups. Are they like officially like separated like different from Protestantism now, or is that what are like the
It's
major
never.
differences
Yeah, when
between
we use
those?
the word like official with evangelical, that can be kind of hard because
Yeah.
there's like some churches in evangelicalism that are more official, I guess. Evangelicalism essentially is more of a movement than
Mhm.
I don't know, an organized group of churches.
Mhm.
It's still a question that is being asked, like, what does it mean to be an evangelical?
Mhm.
Because like Lutherans will call themselves evangelical sometimes, but that's not the evangelical people are talking about on the internet. So
Yeah.
this kind of like low church, um, contemporary worship style church that kind of comes to mind with evangelicalism is pretty. It's new and it's more of a movement than a
Mhm.
group. I think where Redeemed Zoomer is getting at, which I understand, is Protestantism is a historical movement
Mhm.
within the broader Catholic Church, right? So like Martin Luther and other reformers decided there are things that need to change. We've kind of like gone off the beaten path on certain things, and so we need to reform. And
Mhm.
they were eventually labeled as Protestants. They weren't trying to start a new thing called Protestantism,
Mhm.
but in the process, leaders in the Catholic Church called them Protestants because they were protesting, essentially.
Mhm.
And evangelicalism's come along a lot later. Evangelicalism broadly, again, like Lutherans used to call themselves evangelical Catholics, and the idea was just we're gospel centered. And other, I mean, yeah, other independent low church, yeah, contemporary worship. What comes to mind, like a non-denominational church,
Yeah,
that's kind of
yeah.
a new movement. And the reason I think the distinction is they weren't at the Reformation, right? Like
Mhm.
the Acts 29 church I worked at isn't concerned with like reforming the broader Catholic Church. It's just
Mhm.
concerned with like doing its own thing. I don't know if
Yeah.
that distinction makes sense, but it's yeah, that's kind of like a
Yeah, that
my
I really
understanding.
just took away the low church from the high church to the and, like, holding more to, like, the original Protestant values. That
Totally.
stuff.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
what was the question I was about to ask? So, being out of non-denominationalism, I'm just gonna
I know
leave
it's
it at
kind of a
that. I
mouthful.
yeah, I'm not I'm not good at talking like that, but being out of it now, what do you, like looking back, what do you, like, think on it now? what are your opinions on non-denominationalism? Is it good or bad
I
overall?
think I'm critical of, so as I'm trying to do unity, I'm not trying to act like we can't have opinions on these things,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like I'm not
Mhm.
trying to like I want broad Christian unity with like non-denominational Christians, for example, but I'm also not trying to act like that means I need to agree with everything they agree with and vice
Mhm.
versa. So I love non-denominational Christians, and I think something they do really, really well is they're really gospel-centered. Um, you're going to get the clearest call to like just repent and believe in Jesus from those kinds of
Mhm.
Christians. They're really community-driven. So if you go to the non-denominational church, they're typically going to have the best community compared to other Christians. That being said, I'm pretty critical of the model of non-denominationalism because I think I just have a different view of the church now. I don't think any person could just feel called by God to just start a church and just do it. I think that God can use those churches and use those men who start those churches to do really great things. So I'm not denying the work of God or the work of the Spirit in those churches. I'm critical of the idea because it continues to fracture the church. Every non-denominational church isn't really non-denominational; it's its own denomination.
Yeah.
Because like typically, like for the church I worked at, we didn't believe communion was Jesus was present in communion, and we didn't believe that baptism did any sort of a work in saving a person. That's a denominational stance.
Yeah.
Like they might not think that is. They might think, no, that's just biblical, historical Christianity, but that is a denominational stance.
Mhm.
And so that's maybe where I get critical. Is I think sometimes the word non-denominational is misleading. Um, it really just means you are the denomination of whatever the pastor or the elder board has decided you're a part of. Like they kind of made their own quasi denomination, if that makes sense.
Mhm. So what prompted you to start this YouTube channel? Is it like, I imagine your whole goal is to just like unite Christianity a little bit more, like bring people together?
Yeah, there's so much vitriol online.
Mhm.
Everybody's like really upset with each other all the time about this stuff. And not that we can't have opinions or disagree, but like I think
Mhm.
the way we go about that matters. And so as I was studying Catholicism, first thing I realized was I was taught a lot of propaganda about Catholics. Like a lot of
Mhm.
the stuff I believed Catholics believed and the history about Catholicism weren't true. They were lies that I was taught, which
Mhm.
was troubling. And then it made me kind of consider Catholicism more like, wait, what the heck? But also it made me just realize like there needs to be more people actually disagreeing over the things we disagree about and uniting on the things we can unite on. Like for instance, I was taught that like Catholics don't believe that justification, that we are justified first and foremost by the work of Christ. I always thought it was like you believe in Jesus and that he exists, but like you do all these works to be justified in the eyes of
Mhm.
God. And it's just a lot more complicated than that. And I stumbled across a document. It's called the Joint Declaration on the Doctrine of Justification. The JDDJ is what I call it. And it was a joint declaration written by the Catholic Church and a conglomeration of Lutheran churches that
Mhm.
said we actually agree on justification. We've had different historical trajectories with the topic, but overall we agree Christ is the one doing the primary work of bringing people to the Father. And so like stuff like that made me realize like, okay, there is more in common than we give ourselves credit for.
Mhm.
Um, and so I don't know. The YouTube channel of Christianity United had been in my mind for a few years before I'd actually done it. I have like a mock-up from like 2023 of like an old logo that I made for the idea. And the goal was essentially just I want to have these conversations frankly, but I want to have them with like treat them like an in-house discussion. Like I don't want to
Mhm.
treat Catholics, Orthodox, Protestants I disagree with as enemies. I want to treat them as family members, and especially highlight like, look, there's plenty here that we can agree upon in a world that's so divided right now.
Mhm. So what made you initially back away from Catholicism?
Hmm. Um. Initially, is in like growing up, or like as I was studying it, what's
Is
kept
like
me
as
from
you were
going?
studying it, like when you were doing the rosary and going to mass and that stuff?
Yeah. I think it was. I don't want to say. Yeah, I don't know. I want to be careful on how I talk about this because I want to act like I have all
Mhm.
the answers. There's probably somebody
Yeah.
smarter that could like put me under the table and tell me like, no, that's not true. But as
Mhm.
my read on history has shown, the biggest thing has been like there's no infallible supreme pope in the early church. It develops over time. I believe in like the role of bishops in the church. That's why I'm convinced of Anglicanism. I do believe that the Bishop of Rome was a really important role in the early church because of his placement in the Church of Rome. Like Rome was kind of like the hub of the early church and just the early that world at the time. So naturally, it was going to have a seat of importance. But really, what you see in early church history is what's called a pentarchy. There's something Orthodox really emphasize. The pentarchy were like 5 churches that all kind of had like they were like the big dogs, I guess you could say, like team captains, if you will, of if Christianity is a sport, the pentarchy were the team captains, and it was the Bishop of Rome, the Bishop of Jerusalem, the Bishop of Antioch, the Bishop of I might forget some of these, Alexandria, and the Bishop of Constantinople. Those cities and the bishops in those cities were like super important for the history of early Christianity. And yeah, not that they had like this overall like control over all the churches, but they were like pretty important figures, and they had a lot to say about doctrine and creeds and whatnot. And so anyway, all that to say, the Bishop of Rome was never seen as like this person who can make infallible binding dogmas on these other bishops. He was maybe first among equals, kind of like the team captain of the team captains, but he was never this overwhelming, like, we're going to believe in, I don't know, that the communion is the real body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus, and every church has to believe in that now. That's just never how the Pope functioned in early church history. It develops over time. And for me, that was like a big thing of like, okay, that seems like a development to me. And it's not a development I think was a good development. Not that I think like the Pope himself as a person is bad or that the office hasn't done any good. But I don't think that's maybe how the church is supposed to function. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So with that being said, it seems like you had like kind of the same journey that most Protestants will go through at some point, or most young Protestants will be like, "Oh, well, can't be charismatic. I need to be Catholic or Orthodox." So like,
yeah, right.
What would you say? Why are most leaving all these Protestant churches to go to Orthodoxy and Catholicism?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot. I actually thought about this like the other day. I'm always trying to ask this question. I feel like I'm not an expert at all. Like I'm not a theologian. I'm not a sociologist. I'm just a dude making videos on the internet. But I do think that what I see to be the case is I think there's a real lack for depth and something to anchor ourselves, especially in like the Gen Z generation. Like we grew up where postmodernism was the norm, right? The postmodernism being the idea that like there's no objective truth, there's no objective morality. We're just kind of doing the best we can to figure life out as we go. Maybe what's true in this culture isn't true in this culture. And that's just kind of been the given in the world that maybe we seem close in age. So in the world that you and I have grown up in, that seems to just have been the given. That's like the you do you mentality, right? Like you do you, bro. Like that may not be for me, but like if that helps you and you're happy, whatever, go for it, And that hasn't actually given culture any answers. It's really just made things more confusing, right? Like we're debating about like gender and what makes a man and a woman. We're debating about, I don't know, like it feels like politics and like what's the right way to govern a society, right? If any options available, it's really confusing. And it leads to all these power struggles, like in politics and in society about like, I don't know, like questions that feel fundamental, but maybe we can't put our minds onto why. So then you see something like Catholicism and Orthodoxy, and they're different because not only is our society doing that, but evangelicalism is kind of a product of that too, of kind of like Build-A-Bear Christianity. I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but literally it is like we want to form our own church and we want to have elders and we want to have contemporary worship and we want to have this theology. And that's maybe for us, maybe that's not for you. You should go plant your own church or go to another church if that's not for you, right? the ecumenical side of me loves that, but that's not helpful when you're looking for answers to deep theological questions. That's not helpful. And so Catholicism and Orthodoxy they've done a really great job of staying consistent. They're not immune to developing. They've developed as well, but overall they're really consistent and have stayed constant, right? Like empires have fallen and Orthodoxy and Catholicism still are around. That's really convincing and enticing to know, like, this is something I can like anchor myself in. And I'm not just trusting myself to come up with my own idea of what it means to follow Jesus. I can submit to something that's been around for a long time that's going to guide me. So when things get crazy, it's really easy to just hang on to those institutions. I totally get it. I like 100% get that mindset. And I don't think that's all spoken. I don't think people know that's why. That's just like, I love studying culture just as a hobby. And I think that's what I'm seeing. But I'm not an expert.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that I love that Catholics do is like I think it's great that they have like a catechism and like a book where they can just go to and like, oh, I've got a question about this verse. It was like, oh, well, it's explained. I mean, like I think that's probably amazing. I don't know. Do like any Protestant like denominations have that? I know like we have the different confessions that we hold to. Like Lutheran is Wittenberg confession, right?
Mhm.
Or the
Yeah, there's a
like
few. There's like the Heidelberg Catechism, Book of
uh
Concord. Yeah, totally.
Do they still, like, hold to that pretty, like, extremely, or, like, is it more, like, kinda looser now?
Depends on the church. But yeah, I mean, overall, historic Protestantism, that's a
Mhm,
huge part of historic Protestantism is catechisms and confessions of faith. Every Protestant branch has their own subset of confessions and catechisms for that
mhm,
reason. Like, what do we believe about the Eucharist? If I'm an Anglican, I can go to the 39 Articles and say, this is the bare minimum of what it means to be an Anglican and believe in the Eucharist. There's no
mhm,
room for symbolic communion, but there's also kind of a wide variety of opinions you could have on how Christ is present in communion.
mhm,
Whereas like maybe Presbyterianism would be very, very specific. I can't remember maybe like the official theological word, but like spiritual presence, right? They can point to their catechism and go, we believe in spiritual presence. And
mhm.
a Presbyterian might say I'm wrong, so whatever. Correct me in the chat. But either way, I don't know. I feel like um, maybe I'm getting off the beaten path of your question.
Oh, no, you're good,
What
don't
was,
worry about it.
what was the question?
It was, do Protestant churches hold more to these, like, confessions and catechisms like Catholics
Right.
do? Are they
Yeah,
more,
they
like,
should.
loose with it? Yeah, because I was
Totally.
like my friend goes to a Presbyterian church that's, like, right down the road from where I live, and he was like, "Yeah, they, like, hold to the Westminster Confession like nothing else,
Mhm.
it's the only thing."
Yeah,
That's what I was That's where
totally.
I was kinda like my question came from because he's very into that
Yeah.
Presbyterian and that
One The
stuff.
reason I said kind of and it depends is because that's like a
Mhm.
big debate in
Yeah.
Anglicanism and Lutheranism. Like that's why Redeemed Zoomer is so passionate about
Mhm.
the main lines, is because the main lines, you could argue, aren't following the historic catechisms and confessions that are
Yeah.
a part of being Lutheran, right?
Mhm.
So, like, yeah, Lutherans, for instance, will be like, oh, yeah, don't go to an ELCA church,
Mhm.
Evangelical Lutheran Church. They're confessional. They aren't following the confessions of Lutheran history. We are.
Mhm.
Like, if you go to an LCMS church, a Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod, we're following our confessions. And so
Mhm.
that's maybe where I get like, it depends on the church. It's a problem in Anglicanism, it's a problem in Presbyterianism. Yeah.
Yeah. So with these high church Protestantism, is it becoming more progressive? Is that big of an issue where, like, everybody online is saying it is? I know, like, in the historic Anglican church, you have the Archbishop of Canterbury is a woman, even though she
Mhm.
just came out as, like I was watching a video about it, she was like, "I'm not gonna say abortion is right, I'm gonna say it's wrong," and I was like, "Oh, wow, she's probably better than some of them in there," but is it, like, that big of a problem in those churches to where it's, like, needs to be, like they need to do something with councils and that stuff? Or is it, like,
Mhm.
just kinda there and nobody really cares that much about it?
Yeah, I think I can only speak to somebody who's like new to these conversations,
Mhm,
and like new to maybe more traditional Protestantism. But it
mhm,
it seems to be, yeah. Like I feel like growing up, my perception of those churches was like typically they were the ones with like pride flags outside,
mhm,
um, and clergy who were maybe like in homosexual relationships.
Mhm.
And so that was always my perception growing up. And I do think that that alone can be kind of like a confirmation. Like what people are broadly seeing is probably broadly true. There's always going to be exceptions.
Mhm.
That's why like a lot of the mainline Protestant churches have had splinter groups come off of them. So like the Episcopal Church in America is Anglicanism, but the ACNA, Anglican Church in North America, um, broke communion with the Episcopal Church and started their own. It's called a province, but it's their own collection of churches because they don't believe that you can be gay and be a clergy member. Not that you can't
Mhm.
struggle with homosexuality, but like you can't be in a affirming gay relationship and be
Yeah.
clergy. But the Episcopal Church does believe that.
Mhm.
They allow room for that. So I think so, yeah. But I think it's something that every church is struggling with. It just looks different every
Mhm.
church. Like it's a big thing in German Catholicism right now. The German Catholic Church is always getting in trouble for saying and doing things that
Yeah.
maybe the rest of Catholicism isn't fully on board with. Yeah,
Mm.
I don't
That's
know.
what I heard in, like, the comment sections of I follow a couple Catholic influencers, like, even one of my I think, my experiences with some Catholics haven't been, like, the best, but, like,
Mhm.
even some of my favorite Catholic influencers are, like, Trent Horn or just, like, influencers overall. I love watching his videos, but, like, they're always talking about, like, the German church. Is like, what is going
Yeah,
on there? Is like, isn't that, where Lutherans started out, right?
yeah, it's almost in the water over there. Yeah, they
Yeah,
just
it's
like
like
can't help themselves.
they just can't forgive them for that. But yeah, so
Yeah, it's something about Germans. I don't know what it
yeah,
is.
it's going back
Um,
to Catholicism and Orthodoxy. Which one do you more like align with now, or do you think you could? Uh, which church do you think you could join now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like there's things I really like about both. So like with Orthodoxy, um, I probably agree with their ecclesiology, meaning like their theology of the church. So I agree with like yeah, like bishops, right? I believe that in a council of bishops, that church decisions should be made in councils, not by and Catholicism believes that too, but they also have the Pope. So they have councils and the Pope. I don't think you should have the Pope also being kind of an infallible magisterial authority. I don't think that's how it works. So I'd probably line up with Catholicism more in that way.
Mhm.
Um, or I mean orthodoxy in that way. I also like how orthodoxy really protects the mystery, and not mystery in the sense that like we're trying to hide things from people and not explain stuff because orthodoxy has really robust theology, but more like in the sense that when they're taking like they believe Christ is present in communion and that the bread and the wine really are his body and blood, um, but they don't believe that they need to explain it and get into the weeds like the Catholics do, where the Catholics would be like, no, it's transubstantiated. Um, and you get in all this Aristotelian philosophical jargon to explain the Eucharist. And they say that you have to believe in transubstantiation to be a Catholic. Um, yeah, that maybe is why I'd also lean more towards Orthodoxy. But then culturally, I'm like a Westerner, and like the Eastern Orthodox is definitely a product of Eastern culture in terms of just how it functions, how the liturgy works. And I feel more at home in a Catholic church than an Orthodox church, which doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. It just feels more comfortable. So yeah, I don't know. There are things I like about both of them. I guess maybe if I had to pick, it might be Orthodoxy, but not because I'm like, I don't know. There's people who are just obsessed with Orthodoxy, and I'm more obsessed with Catholicism in terms of like that's the group I'm the most interested in. But where I'm at theologically, I'd probably align more with Eastern Orthodoxy, probably more Oriental Orthodoxy though, which is a whole nother
Yeah.
subset.
What's that whole thing with like all them? Is it just like how what I've heard is like Protestants have different like state churches? Is that kind of like the regional churches for the Orthodox is like the Eastern, the Coptic, the Oriental? Are they all in communion with each other, or do they all believe like I'm the one true church and you're not?
No, most of them are in communion with each other right now.
Mm.
The Church of Constantinople and the Church of Moscow are not in communion with each other, which is a big thing.
Mhm.
It's a big problem in the Orthodox Church right now, and I feel for them. But that doesn't mean they don't think that they aren't true Orthodox Christians. It just means we're not taking communion, we're fighting, and so we're not going to talk to each other for a bit until we sort that out. And so yeah, but they all believe they're a part of the one true church.
Mm.
Yeah, like the Antiochian Orthodox don't look at the um, yeah, like the Ukrainian Orthodox and go, you're not real Orthodox Christians. You're not a part of the one true church. They're all friends. Yeah.
Mhm. Do you think it hurts Christianity overall with saying I'm the one true church and you're not? And there's like with Catholics and Orthodox saying, there's no, if there's somebody saved outside of the church, it's done by, the Catholic through the Catholic churches. Do you think that kind of hurts
Mm.
Christianity overall?
I think certain expressions of it have. I understand why Catholics and Eastern Orthodox and Oriental Orthodox, I understand why they all want to say they're the one true church, and theologically they kind of have to. So I'm all right. I'm all right operating with that because typically the average Orthodox and Catholic is going to be a lot softer on that than like in the Middle Ages, for instance.
Yeah.
But in certain expressions of it, yeah, like when you are refusing to engage with people because they're not real Christians, that's problematic to me. But I also understand why they believe that. And I'm not going to tell them not to believe that. I do think there is one true church. I think the one true church has been fractured and that we should all be kind of under one umbrella again. But that's what that looks like and how it's going to happen. I don't know. That's for bigger minds than mine.
Yeah. So you recently had a video interviewing a monk. Could you tell me a little bit about your experience with that? Is there like anything specific you learned or you think you pulled away from that interview?
Yeah, totally. That was a lot of fun. That was Father Anthony from St. Shenouda Monastery, which is in
Mhm.
Sydney, Australia, and he's Coptic Orthodox.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of work with Coptic Orthodox folks lately, and it's been a lot of fun. I really love that branch of Christianity. Yeah, it was really fun. I think what I learned most from like talking to Father Anthony was how practical being a monk really is. Like there's aspects to it that are really unique to that lifestyle. But some of the practices that he was talking about, it's like we should be doing that, right? Like spending
Mhm.
time in silence on our own in nature to connect with God. That's a really good thing to do. Having a regular rhythm of prayer, really
Mhm.
good thing to do. So I think what shocked me most and what I learned was like these are things that like I should be doing in my life, and I can do in my life. I don't have to like become celibate and move to a monastery
Mhm.
to do these things. Yeah, that was super awesome.
Yeah. So do they just like I don't want to seem like I've been trying to learn a little bit about Orthodoxy and Catholicism. I'm not like very deep into that. I it's like with work it's like hard for me to get into all that. But
Totally. Yeah.
is like do they just stay in the monastery all day? Do they ever like here's the question. Okay, do they ever go out and evangelize or like share that at all?
Yeah, it depends on the type of monk you are. So like some monasteries are more secluded than
Mhm.
others. Um, and some monks, they do make it like it's like part of their vocation as being a monk is to go out and preach the gospel. It's like Franciscans, for instance,
Mhm.
is a Catholic branch of monasticism. Yeah, they definitely they're not anti-evangelism by any means. And then what
Mhm.
Father Anthony was telling me is the nature of being a monastery. We kind of naturally we don't have to go out because people are visiting us all the time, and we allow visitors
Mhm.
and we talk to visitors, and we have non-Christians come to just check us out, and yeah, so they're really open to evangelism, and it typically functions more in that way where they have retreats going on and they have this really beautiful property and it's usually out in nature somewhere. You can't really find anywhere else like it. And so then it draws people and they talk to the monks and they start to accept Christ. There's tons of stories like that throughout church
Yeah.
history.
That's been some of my favorite things about trying to teach myself more about those other branches of Christianity is like learning something like, oh, you would think like that's something I just learned right now is I think like a monk just stays inside and prays all day, but knowing that he actually
Right.
like, does stuff to like help the faith and that just seems really cool to me. And I just love
Totally.
learning the new stuff about like especially those branches of Christianity, how historic it is. I'm a history nut. It's like I'm even reading a book on the Crusades right now and it's very fun and learning a little bit
Yeah.
more about those 2 churches and that. So, with another question is, so what has been a few things that have, really boosted your faith in a way? Like, I saw a video where you made a book about that Anglican prayer book, and that actually kinda got me interested into where I might buy that, but what are, like, some other things in that too? Could you
Nice.
talk a little bit about that for me?
Talk a little about what specifically I might have missed the
Oh,
question.
the prayer book too. The prayer book and some other things
Oh,
that might have boosted your faith.
yeah. I think one that was maybe it's still maybe controversial for people who are like in evangelical and Protestant circles would be the rosary. the rosary's actually been overall pretty beneficial for my faith. I don't pray it that often. There was a time in my life where I was praying it a ton, and I have a video talking about that. But occasionally I'll pull it out for certain occasions. So like yesterday was the Feast of the Annunciation, or no, 2 days ago was the Feast of the Annunciation, which is like a feast day in traditional Christianity to remember Saint Gabriel telling Mary, hey, you've been chosen to carry the Messiah in your womb. And so I prayed the rosary that day just to kind of commemorate that, think about that, meditate on that. I'm not recommending everybody does that by any means. For me, that's been really great. And I think overall, what's also been really helpful is silence and solitude, kind of like learning from the monks, like having once a month. It's a once a month rhythm where I just leave, like I go way out in the woods somewhere, and I shut my phone off. I have it on do not disturb so my wife can still reach me, but I shut my phone off. I just sit in silence for hours and just try to, like, if God's got something to say, hear it, read some scripture, maybe do some written prayers out of the prayer book, write journal and stuff like that, and just take time alone to really kind of shut off the noise and be more open to maybe what the Spirit has to say to me in that moment. Stuff like that has been really helpful too.
Okay. And is there what about Anglicanism? I want to know a little bit more about that because I've been interested in that. Could you explain to me like how that kind of like how those guys kind of got started with Luther and then how that split off from that and what their like main beliefs and differences from Catholicism are?
Yeah, so Anglicanism didn't split off from Luther. It just happened in a different location. So Luther wasn't the only person that was like upset with how things were going in the church at the time. All over the world, there were a lot of people that were voicing concerns and trying to have their own reformations. And so England was no exception. England had their own reformation of sorts. There were already thinkers in the Anglican church that were saying there are some things that have gotten into the water that should be removed. We need to strain these things out. Like one would be problems with like indulgences, like trying to pay for indulgences. So pay for like a lesser penalty in purgatory. Another would be like priestly celibacy and all that stuff. That was already happening. And then a big political shift happened when King Henry VIII wanted to get divorced. And so then he goes to the Pope and says, can you grant me a divorce? An annulment is what he's called, not a divorce. And the Pope said no. And for political reasons. I believe like maybe he was related to the woman that King Henry VIII was married to or something like that. I'd save that for somebody who's more of an expert on that specific instance. What I do know is the Pope denied the annulment. And because of that, King Henry VIII said, okay, the Church of England is doing its own thing and I'm in charge of the Church of England now. And stuff like that is not uncommon in English history. The English church has always had a tense relationship with Rome. And there have been other moments in history where the English church toyed with the idea of splitting off and being its own independent church apart from the Church of Rome. And so reformers, took advantage of the situation, like Thomas Cranmer, for instance, and said, well, hey, while we're split off, we should start doing some of these reforms that we've been wanting to do and really haven't had the opportunity to do. And King Henry VIII was like, it's a mixed bag with him. There were some things that he was like fine with, but there was also a lot of things where he'd like persecute Protestant reformers for doing. He was kind of a wild card in terms of that stuff. And so it was a really rough history of like, you get one ruler who was Catholic and they'd say, okay, England is Catholic again. And they'd start killing Protestants. Then you have another ruler who says, no, England's Protestant and we're going to split from the Church of Rome again. And we're killing all the Protestants. It was really Queen Elizabeth I, who was the ruler of the Church of England at the time, not the Church of England, the Kingdom of England, who was sick of like the back and forth. And like her nation was getting really divided. And so she went to reformers and was like, we need to find a way to bridge the gap between these two groups. And Anglicanism, as we know it today, was kind of birthed out of that, of like, what are the essentials that we can keep from the reformers and from the Catholics? And let's do that. Let's do that so that we can get along. That's like a really rough history. Like I would encourage you to look into that more and maybe hear from somebody who's a historian. That was really rough.
When I was growing up, I've looked into it a little bit. I always knew it was because of Henry VIII wanted to have a bunch of wives, and then Queen Mary was, killing a bunch of Protestants, and I always thought it was just, the one-sided, the Catholics killing all the Protestants, "We hate you guys," and then I looked into it, and I was like, "Oh," it's like, we did the same thing. I mean, like, it wasn't
Yeah,
we
that
were
was just
both
in the
kinda
like, that's just what the culture was back then. People were just
Yeah,
really medieval culture in general, it's getting out of the medieval era, but it's still, pretty
yeah,
close enough for
yeah,
me to say, like, they were just really intense people, and yeah, you just
yeah,
kill people a lot more regularly for those
yeah.
kinds of issues.
It was still, like, a lot closer to the Crusades too, like, still just only a couple 100 years removed from that, so that was probably still more of the culture with, like, "Oh, you're the heathens, you wanna split from us, we're just gonna kill you like we did the Muslims," and that stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's an aspect where church violence in church history is kind of you just have to accept it. You have to
Yeah,
accept it, and there's justifications for like maybe like why one crusade was better than another, and like some of those are
mhm,
really convincing. Why this person deserved to be burned at the stake, and this person maybe didn't. But overall, it's just kind of something a historical reality we have to deal with.
yeah,
The only people that are truly innocent in all of it, I'd say, are um, Oriental Orthodoxy. I don't think they ever killed anybody for
mhm,
disagreeing with them. And then Anabaptists. So like they were like radical
yeah,
reformers who were like, you didn't
mhm,
reform hard enough. That's where I come from. My ancestors
yeah,
they're called Mennonites. And
mhm,
Mennonites were infamously persecuted by like Protestants and Catholics and like were like drowned and burned at the stake. And it's really hard to find people who are innocent in that era of like
mhm.
murdering people for your religious
It was
beliefs.
like with the I'm studying the Crusades right now, I'm reading a book by Dan Jones on it, and it's kinda hard to justify it, but I think if any are justified, it's gotta be the First Crusade. Now, I'm not advocating for any of the killing that happened because there was even a hermit that led them to just, off a bunch of Jews, and it just,
Hmm.
like, happened. It was that culture. And they just did that, but, like, I think if anything had to be justified aside from the needless killings, it had to be, like, the First Crusade with studying it, with, like, trying to take Spain back, the Islam is kinda trying to conquer the Middle East, and they're coming on the Byzantines and all that stuff, but then every crusade, when I've read it, it just gets, like, worse and worse and worse, and then, like, I think I'm in a 3rd crusade right now, and it's just they randomly attacked Constantinople because they didn't like him, and it's, like, another Christian nation because we're just being greedy and that stuff. But what's your whole, like, opinion on the
Totally.
Crusades? Yeah. Do you have an opinion on
Oh, that's a
those
good
or
question.
Yeah.
Not entirely, not anything that's super well formed. I mean, I could just give like,
Mhm,
yeah, and like my loose like reading and watching on YouTube. Like First Crusade seems justified to me. I believe in just war theory. So there's a time where
mhm.
it is okay to kill people as Christians,
Yeah.
if the need arises. It's like a necessary it's a problem. It's a cause of sin, but it's a necessary problem that we have to you deal with sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, Other than that, I don't really have a whole bunch of opinions other than, yeah, like I know like the killing of Orthodox Christians by Catholic Christians is a huge stain on church history. And I think
Mhm.
most people wish that never happened, Catholics and Orthodox alike.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was just part of the culture. Like it's really easy to look back at that time period and go, how could we ever do that? And not understand like they were just thinking completely differently. The medieval mind was so different than our mind.
Mhm.
Um, we're post Renaissance, post Industrial Revolution. We've had so many different things happen in history that have shaped the way we think. That that didn't shape the way they think. So it's okay to look back and go, yeah, that the killing of like Orthodox Christians that was wrong.
Yeah.
But it's
Mhm.
also like we kind of have to understand like they were just thinking way differently than we're thinking now. They're just
Yeah.
different people.
I think from when I studied it, it was talking about how they were very, like, into, the Old Testament that kinda idolized that. It was like, "Okay, we're going to be like that in King David," and I don't really wanna, like, say, like, the times were different in the Old Testament. It was a different covenant, and they had to act differently, but, there were a lot of just wars in King David's time, and that's what the most I would try and compare the Crusades to, or at least the first one in a sense. But I really only have like two more questions if I could
Yeah.
get into those real quick. It's the first one
Sweet.
is, do you have a favorite pastor or YouTuber that you watch the most and that have helped you out in your journey with Christ?
That's a good question. Can I run in the other room real quick and then come
Oh
back?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll pause it real quick. I'll pause it. I gotcha.
I think you
It's unpaused. I just loaded my question sheet. Turns out I have three, so I guess it's your lucky day.
works for me.
So we'll get into This one is tell me about the church fathers. I know you've read them. You said you were introduced to them by it was at your non-denominational church, right? Is that was
It
my
was
understanding?
that's when I started reading them personally, but like my
Mhm.
Pentecostal pastor that I was mentored under for a brief stint as a young adult,
Mhm.
he was the first one to like tell me about the church fathers and tell me I should read them. And I was like,
Mhm.
yeah, that sounds really boring. And then I didn't read them until about like 2 or 3 years later when I was a youth
Mhm.
pastor.
Yeah. So, what have you learned for them, and what would you like recommend a good starting book? Because I haven't read them yet, and I kind of want to get into them. So, what would you recommend would be a good starting book?
Yeah. I think it's a really good question. Yeah, where to start? I really like Athanasius of Alexandria is on the Incarnation. He's a really
Hmm.
good person to read. He just kind of gives like, I guess one, it's really encouraging to show how consistent the church has been in its belief on Christ and him being fully God, fully man.
Hmm.
That's a really good one. I also really like. I think if you want to get into like the weeds on like maybe some of the debates about like church authority and church and communion and bishops and all that stuff, Ignatius of Antioch has a lot of letters that are worth reading. Ignatius of Antioch also learned from the Apostle John. So you have Jesus, John, Ignatius. So he's whatever he believes is going to be pretty aligned with what John believed. You can assume.
Hmm.
And he was also a martyr, and so the letters that we have from him are letters he wrote to churches on his way to being martyred. So there's a lot of good stuff in there in terms of how did the early church function, but also, um, yeah, like what were they believing? How did they think? What was the early church like? Post, the book of Acts and the letters
Hmm.
of Paul and all that. And then I think maybe one more that's maybe more of a grind. I'm reading it right now. It's more of a grind, but it's definitely worth it. Is um, there's a church father named Eusebius, and he wrote a pretty comprehensive church history book,
Hmm.
leading up to a little bit past the First Council of Nicaea, like the 300s. He goes, yeah, from Christ to the 300s. That's a pretty helpful book to kind of get a good idea, like how the early church developed,
Hmm.
and a little bit more of how it functioned and whatnot. So I don't know. Yeah, there's so many good church fathers. I would start with Ignatius and Athanasius, definitely.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll probably add that to my TBR. And then, what about? Do you have a pastor or YouTuber that you watch the most that kind of helps you with your faith at all?
Mm, I mean, personally, for me, I really love. I love. There's a lot of people. I try to watch YouTube still. It's harder now that I'm making videos actually to watch YouTube. I've found, but I really like Gavin Ortland. I guess maybe he'd be a great guy to
Mm-hmm.
go to watch if you haven't yet.
Yeah.
Gavin Ortland is a Baptist pastor, church
Mhm.
historian, really great guy. Yeah, he handles these conversations with a lot of the care that's inspired me to handle them. Yeah, he's not afraid of stating his beliefs, but he's also not trying to like um, be rude or condescending or dismissive to people that disagree with him. So overall, I think he'd be really great. That's more church history stuff and like
Mhm.
theological debates, which is more what I'm watching on YouTube. In terms of like pastors that have helped me grow in my faith, I don't know, just my own pastor. He's pretty great.
Yeah, and then, like, we had some friends over. I watched Gavin Ortland a little bit, and he put a video out on Revelations that I really liked. I got about, like, 30 minutes into it, and for some reason, I just never continued it, and we had some friends over, and we were just talking about Revelations, and I think I said 5 times, it was like, I hold more
Yeah.
to, like, partialism with the temple stuff and then the and 70 AD and then futurism with which I don't really know, and I think I said, like, 5 times. I don't know, but I haven't finished the Gavin Ortland video, so I'll get back to you on that. And then I really like watching his
Yeah.
videos, and those have helped me, like, get more into the history stuff because again, I'm a really big history nut. And then I
Mhm.
just got one more question for you is, what do you believe is the biggest problem facing the church? Do you believe we have one? And what do we need to do to overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think it's that we're also divided right now. Like, I think
Mhm,
a lot of the issues of all you could name a list of issues that every church is dealing with, and a lot of them are going to line up, or
mm,
they're going to align with like theological liberalism is one. Like there are people in
mhm,
Catholicism, Orthodoxy, and Protestantism that are straying from beliefs in the Trinity, beliefs in the virgin birth, beliefs in the resurrection. That's really crucial. Issues around like church attendance. All of our church attendances are dropping. That might be changing with Catholicism and Orthodoxy. I haven't seen stats that have been fully convincing for me yet. Trent Horn would even say, like, yeah, no, we're still losing people. We're not growing yet. So we're losing people, all kinds of issues. And I think it's the division that really is hurting us. I think we'd be a lot stronger and we'd be able to face these problems of the modern age a lot better if we put our heads together. We don't even have to all be like under one institution necessarily again, but if we all got in the habit of meeting together and hearing each other's perspectives, that would do a lot of hope for the church, I think. So it's division. We need to be less divided. However,
do you think there is a path to being more unified, like with having a council of like Catholic leaders, Orthodox, Protestant leaders coming together and like deciding on certain things for Christianity and how we can unite? Do you think that would, could ever happen in our lifetimes, or what do you think were things as Christians we could do to make sure, like, or try and push it towards that happening? Sorry if I went a little
that's a good question.
messed up that question a little bit.
No, that was helpful. I think if I'm understanding right, you're asking, could we ever in our lifetime get a council together of like all these different branches of Christianity and kind of come to some agreement? I think that'd be really, really hard. I hope so, but I don't know. I'm not that optimistic. I think it'd be like there are certain churches that have an easier time playing ball with each other than other churches. So a Baptist church is going to have a lot harder of a time finding unity with the Catholic Church than the Anglican Church. Anglicans are meeting all the time with Orthodox bishops and Catholic bishops and the Catholic Pope. That's happening all the time because there's a lot more that we agree on. Or like Pentecostals. Pentecostals are going to have a really hard, and it's also hard because it's like, who do we go to? Like, we can go to a few key figures in like Lutheranism and Presbyterianism and Anglicanism, but who do we go to with like non-denominational Christians? There's no person or group that's kind of like heading all of them up. So I think I don't know. I'm not necessarily super optimistic on that. I think the church unity I'm going for right now is, and I think we could do is really easy fix is a recognition that we're all Christians, which for the most part, all institutionally we all do. We all recognize we're all Christians. And then the other one would be maybe someday most of us could be taking the sacraments together, right? Like I'm an Anglican. I believe in the real presence of Christ. I don't believe in transubstantiation. So right now that's barring me from communion with Catholics, among other things. But yeah, I don't know. The hope would be maybe we could unite around that. I think that if we unite around communion first, the sacraments, then we would see more institutional unity. But I actually think it's got to start with the sacraments.
Yeah, I believe like most informed, sane Christians would say, hey, like even if you're a Baptist, you could look at the Catholics or Orthodox and be like, hey, yeah, I mean, I disagree with them a lot. They might have some what I believe to be man-made traditions in there, but I'd say they're still Christians. And I feel like some Catholics could look at, I feel like most Catholics can at least recognize that Protestants are doing great at evangelizing. And well, we might not have what they say the fullness of the faith, but just getting people's foot in the door at least.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, even in the Catholic Catechism, they say we're separated brethren, but we are brethren. We have, we have true salvation. We have true means of sanctification. It's in their catechism. Like that's a thing they believe, which is comforting to know and helpful in these dialogues.
It's a lot better to know than when I see some random Catholic influencers say all Protestants aren't saved, and then that's actually in their catechism. So that's great.
Yeah, right. Their church would disagree with them, unfortunately, which means they need to repent.
But there's a lot. I can't even talk bad about Catholics on that front. There's a lot of crazy Protestants out there that say probably some weirder stuff. Totally. I was like, I might like harp on Catholics sometimes, but it's like when I look into like these Protestant circles, they are freaking, man, they are insane sometimes out there, dude. Saying some crazy things. But yeah, man, thank you for coming on the pod. This was very great. I've been looking forward to this, but thank you, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for making it happen. I was stoked to do it. Good talking with you, Jacob.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right. Oh, and then 3, 2, 1.
Yeah. Thank you.